am Nora Shawki. I'm an Egyptian archaeologist, and I dig. I dig all over Egypt mainly, but also Sudan. So let's start right ahead, and I'll show you guys some cool pictures from my excavations. So this is an image, a Google satellite image from Google Earth. Some of you are familiar with it, of Egypt. So if you could see Egypt on the map, it is massive, and you could see it's a lot of beige, yellow color. That's all desert. Most of Egypt is desert. If you guys can notice that green, greenish fan shape up north, and then you kind of have a green hue of a line going all the way in the middle of the country. So that is the Nile River. And a fun fact actually about Egypt is where modern Egyptians are only living on about 11% of the entire country. And it sounds like almost nothing. It's pretty crazy. It's because everyone lives around the Nile. The Nile was always the source of life from ancient Egyptians till now with modern Egyptians. So what I do is I excavate all over Egypt, and I'll show you some of the areas I focus on, and I excavate the ancient world, so ancient civilizations. So something that most people don't know is less than 1% of ancient Egypt has been discovered and excavated. So most of you might be familiar with really well-known things coming out of Egypt, like the Golden Mask of King Tut, or the pyramids of Giza, for example, or these super colorful tombs. These things are all coming out of Egypt, but we've barely just scratched the surface. So I want to show you a bit of what I do. So again, I mentioned that fan-shaped green area at the very top. This is it zoomed in. This is actually referred to as the Nile Delta. So a lot of my digging is up here in this area. And that's mainly because we're living on top of most of the ancient sites, modern Egyptians. So there's a huge urgency to dig here so we can protect and preserve all of the ancient artifacts before they're gone forever. So if you can see these little dots all over, these are all ancient sites. So these are ancient towns and cities where ancient Egyptians used to live. And these are, people used to live here since at least 5,000, 5,500 years ago. So there's a long, long history for Egypt. So these little dots are all the sites that we've discovered so far, and there's still some more under the modern villages. So I wanted to show you what it looks like at some of our dig sites. So here at the very top, you can see an image. This is around our 4 a.m. wake-up call. So we do wake up quite early. Some of you might be annoyed to wake up early for school sometimes. Well, for archaeologists, we have to wake up usually before the sun is out. So 4 a.m. is very normal for us to wake up. And the image at the bottom is what it looks like when we come back from our dig day. So we wake up super early for the main reason of the sun. Obviously, it gets very hot. We're in a desert, like I mentioned. So we need to be digging as in the cooler time of the day. And then we dig until around 1 p.m., 1 or 2 p.m. And that's when it gets, of course, way too hot. And we have to go inside to what it's called our magazine or a lab, where we study a lot of the things we find. And our normal day would look a little like this. So you can see me in the top image. I'm using some of the technology and equipment that we use on site. So the top one is actually a dumpy level. This is to get levels to show where, what point of the surface did we find certain artifacts. And then down lower, you can see me on a ladder holding this weird piece of equipment. So this is actually one of my scientific specialties. A lot of people ask, how do you know where to dig, right? As you saw, Egypt is a huge land of desert. So a little clue in helping us on how to dig is our use of technology. So what I'm holding here, this white piece of equipment, is called a magnetometer. This is able to kind of, to simply put it, it's X-raying the ground that we're going to be on. So it can X-ray maybe around, I would say around 5 meters beneath the surface, so I can see what's underneath. And of course, it is similar to an X-ray. The data that's there, I don't get a perfect image of what's underneath, but I can see an outline of what structure it is. So I can tell you if it's a temple or if it's supposed to be a domestic structure like a home or the base of a pyramid, for example. It can kind of narrow down what we're looking for and where we're gonna start digging. So the first thing we always do is do this survey, a geophysical survey around the area, to know where to actually start focusing on. Because I've had colleagues who have been digging in the desert for months at a time and had nothing but sand. So it's also very, very important to be able to be as accurate as we can. And technology really helps us do that quicker and better these days. And on the right, you could see I have my journal, trusted journal. We write everything, even by hand, even with the technology we have, we do both. And also my trusted pack that I always have all my tools, you know, the brushes, a trowel, a compass, all those handy things. And in front of you is tea. This is our caffeine on site. We have tea with lots of sugar. This is the kind of Egyptian Bedouin and tribal way in Egypt. So a lot of our team members from these local sites give us this to kind of give you energy throughout the day. This is another one of my sites. This is what it looks like on the surface level. So you can see some of the areas actually are very untouched by modern civilization. They look like very vast, empty mounds of sand and desert in the distance. So it's pretty peaceful, very nice and beautiful. This one is actually in Sudan, but it's an Egyptian site. So I say this because in ancient Egypt, the borders were a bit different than now. So ancient Egyptians actually ruled parts of Sudan, which was called Nubia. So here's just some of my workers in front of me. So this is a part of my team members. And this is us digging. This is me at the bottom of a burial chamber. So this is an actual burial chamber where a tomb was buried. So someone had their body and their family members' bodies mummified to be preserved for eternity and put into this tomb. So this is me and my team right when we got to the bottom. Of course, you can see how happy I am that we're going to be learning a lot more about this specific family. This is me at the end of a day of digging. It's quite messy, quite dirty. If anyone likes camping, you'd be a perfect fit to be an archaeologist. I do recommend it. Here's another image of what the sites look like. On the left, this is us on day one of digging. And on the right, you could see this is after around 2 years worth of digging in this site. You could see all these little squares. Those are all trenches. So all squares that we were digging through. And you could see structures forming in the middle of those squares. So that's how we kind of pieced together an ancient city that existed once upon a time. This is another view of the site. You could see the buildings on the right. These are modern buildings of people living there today. And on the left side, this whole mound is called a tell. So Tell. This is what we call them here. They're actually, it means mound in Arabic. And that's where an ancient settlement was. It's an elevated mound that is still there for us to excavate and discover. Here's another shot of it. You can see structures next to the people sitting in the front. Those structures are starting to appear. So we're starting to see structures here. This one is actually a part of a temple complex, so an ancient religious complex. And here, if you guys can guess by now, this is actually a temple. This is an Egyptian temple in a site. Of course, the site might just look like dirt in the beginning, but then you start digging just a meter and a half, and you're going to hit limestone. So this is a pretty prominent material that you'd find to be used in building structures, and especially something as large and as prestigious as an ancient Egyptian temple. So some areas you won't find things so preserved. Other times I'll show you better preserved examples. Here, of course, you can see the water coming up. This is the water table from the Nile, of course. So this is another obstacle we have when we're excavating. Not everything is dry and perfect and preserved. Here's another image to show you how close the ancient sites are to the modern villages. So all these red brick buildings, these are people living there right now. And we are digging right in the foreground over here. So everything is very, very close because of the population boom. This is another angle of us digging. You can see how deep some of these shafts go, how deep we keep digging, especially in the sandy areas where it's much softer to excavate. And in archaeology, context is everything. So objects allow us to reconstruct the past. So I wanted to show you guys some of the artifacts that we find. This is a coin that we found. This was a great way for us to date the site and give us a time period of when they were using it. So on the left is how the coin is in situ, which means how it is this as it was, the context is there, how we discovered it. Doesn't look like much, might look like some trash to some people. Then when we take it to our metal experts and specialists, they clean it, and then they are able to show us what's on the right, which is the coin of Maximus II and coin of Probus. So these are Roman emperors, which was very interesting because it dated our site to the Roman invasion, actually. So we had Roman presence in some of these Egyptian sites. This is another thing we see everywhere. These are pottery sherds. So these are basically the ancient world's plastic. Okay, it's terracotta, so it's all handmade pottery that you might be familiar with today, but this is all over the ancient world. So we find it everywhere because it's people's cups, plates, you name it. And this is a great way to indicate a date for a time period, because every dynasty, every time period in ancient Egypt had their own style of how they would make this pottery. So it's also a really good clue to give us a time period. Here's a perfect pot that's intact, wasn't broken or anything. You could see the beautiful design on it. So we also have examples like this, and these would be storage vessels. You know, they could have hold grains or liquids, you name it. This is another very, very cool find. This is actually a coffin lid. As you can see, this was a person living once upon a time. It was not a royal figure, but a very elite upper class in ancient Egyptian upper class, because it was very expensive to be able to mummify yourself and have a coffin lid. Of course, they had very colorful lids. You can see some of the remains of the paint here. Here's another better image. You can see the face of the person, and we look for inscriptions all the time to be able to read and find out who it belonged to. So this is the storytelling aspect. We're trying to tell people's stories who lived here. Here's another part of another coffin, which is made from wood. Wood is very hard to find preserved. This is at least 3,500 years old. So imagine, you know, any piece of wood that we have in today's world can get, you know, doesn't get maintained well and wouldn't be preserved. So this is a miracle to find something like this. You can see Egyptian hieroglyphs, these shapes and objects all around. This is the language that they had back then. And in the middle, you could see the center figure. There's a person who's looking to the left. So this is who it belonged to. But of course, we don't get lucky all the time. The inscription with his name was missing, unfortunately. Here I am excavating another burial tomb. You could see right next to my hands, there is a skull. So I will show you what that looks like close up. This is one of the burial chambers. Now, what's cool about this and interesting is that the teeth always survive. So the teeth are one of the strongest parts of the human skeleton, and this gives us a huge indicator about the person who used to be living there. So about their diet, what they were eating, how old they were, what if they were male, female, you know, it can give us a lot of cool insight. Something else that we find at these sites are stela, for example. You could see these are rock cut, so into the natural rocks that you can see. And you could see that they kind of carved out these etchings with hieroglyphs and with imagery. This is like their ancient version of a billboard. If you see billboards now in big cities, it's like an advertisement. It's the same thing in the ancient world, but they're kind of giving you a headline telling you, this is my territory, or don't come here. This is, you know, the king of this land. So I just want to leave you with this. I always encourage you to protect the things you care about, whatever it is. And I do strongly encourage you to explore your own backyard, wherever you are in the world. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from. There's so much history wherever your home is, wherever your home country is. So I do encourage you to explore, ask around town, you know, find out where you really come from, and go to your local museums and ask questions about other countries, other civilizations, because, you know, these borders are just a modern addition. We're all collectively together, you know, trying to understand humanity itself and where we all come from together as humans. So I encourage you to protect the things you care about.